Thank you. Welcome everybody, good afternoon, and thank you for joining this afternoon's panel. My name's Lewis Roberts, Interim Workplace Services Director for the Government Property Agency. And I've personally been working in the workplace industry for over 2 decades, both in the private sector and also in the public sector as well. So I'm really pleased to be hosting today's panel. Be the change we want to see, but more importantly, how do we plan for the workplace of the future now? So my personal reflections since joining the civil service, I was asked to share these. And I think we work relentlessly to improve communities, effectively to make sure that taxpayers' money is spent well. They get value for money, but also to enable civil servants to do their jobs better, safer, faster and smarter. And that is a deliberate pun, by the way. This, of course, benefits UK citizens and the communities which we live and we work in. But I've learned one thing since joining civil service, which is that we do change and we do it a lot. And it's effectively part of our culture, it's how we're conditioned and we're kind of really well adapted to this. But this, I think, is a bit of a superpower for civil service and something we need to leverage more when we do important workplace change. So workplace change for me is important because I personally find it a really fascinating subject. I think our world is changing, technology is changing, and as a result, our needs are changing. So for me, I think the workplace becomes almost like a bit of a computer game with endless levels. You never really conquer it because it changes constantly. And I think that our evolution is a continuous cycle of pivot, learn, innovate, and then adjust. And I think that in particular for me, that interconnection that happens between workplace and workspace is something that's really interesting and is also a helpful segue into the start of our panel today. So shortly we'll hear a little bit more from our panel. I need to do some housekeeping first as well. So we do have some time for questions, so please use the app or the website to log your questions, and I'll of course put these to our panel at the end of the session. It is a hybrid event, so again, we've got people joining in the room, but also virtually. Please use the chat box to engage with each other as well, so you can use that to have your own conversations and continue to support the Smarter Working Live community that we thrive to support. So without further ado, I will introduce our panel members. Ravi.
Great. I was going to introduce me, I thought. Great. Look, hi, everybody. I will no doubt come on to questions in a moment. Is that right? So yes. I'll just say kind of what I do. So Ravi Chand. I'm a director in the Office for Government Property, and we oversee about £180 billion worth of what we call central government estates in terms of what our responsibilities are. But my direct responsibilities are for places of growth across the UK, the plan for London, which is about our London consolidation, our London footprint, and also supporting our network of permanent secretaries across the UK who are sponsoring our places across the UK, strengthening UK government presence in those places. And more recently, I've taken on policy sponsorship for GPA, which has opened my eyes in other ways. So we'll no doubt talk about some of that as well. So shall I hand over to Leah at this stage?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Leah Jones. I'm the Deputy Director for Workplace Experience at the Government Property Agency. And I suppose to summarise my role, I'm interested in our customers, so they're the civil servants who are working and using GPA buildings. I'm interested in understanding what your workplace experiences are like and what we can do to make them better, to support you better in your roles you need to deliver for the public.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Hannah Dwyer. I work at JLL. I lead the Work Dynamics Research and Strategy team for the EMEA region. So Work Dynamics is a little bit ambiguous, so just to explain what that is. Formerly Corporate Solutions, it's basically the part of the JLL business that focuses on the future world of work. And it's my job within research and strategy to stay on top of trends, develop thought leadership and be involved in kind of key strategic conversations that help guide us, JLL. I suppose we are a corporate as well, but then also the client base that we have, public sector and indeed all industries.
Hi everyone, I am Jen Watson. I am an associate interior designer and workplace specialist at AtkinsRéalis. I'm part of a much bigger multidisciplinary design team. We've been partners with the Government Property Agency since 2018, and since that time we've designed, I think, over 200,000 meters squared of office spaces, workspaces for the civil service. Since I joined AtkinsRéalis 3 years ago, I have led the interiors for several projects across the country for FCDO and the GPA. And last year I also had the great pleasure of being seconded to the GPA as a workplace designer to the workplace design team for 6 months. Looking forward to talking about workplace.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, we brought out the A team for you today. First question to you then, Ravi. So we use the term workplace, workspace quite a lot, and I guess in particular in the government property agency, it's part of our core language. These phrases can sometimes be used interchangeably. Before we look into workplace, in your role as SRO for Places for Growth, how do you define the difference between space and place?
So I'll start with place first, because our focus in government has been about driving a stronger UK government presence across all parts of the UK rather than being London-centric. And so we've got a genuine focus on some of the very big places across the UK. And I think we generally have grown and concentrated in about 15 places in the UK, although you will see a UK government presence in many more places than that. And these places have become places where we've been able to co-locate government departments, arm's length bodies, public bodies in locations in cities, within walking distance generally of each other, and certainly near public transport. So this has allowed us to attract the talent we want and have a mix of skills we need in the organisations that we have working for government, better connected to civic leaders, and an array of other things that we think place has unlocked. When we talk about space, the thing about space is the offices. If you have been to some of the, particularly offices that the Government Property Agency run overseas, it'd be worth going and seeing for yourself. Actually, what great workplaces these have become. The space that's been created is an enabling space. And when we talk about space, it's a space that allows multiple departments to work in and around each other in buildings, in a way that they can collaborate, in a way that they can develop ideas, innovate, design government policy or delivery policy for the citizen, for the public, in a much more joined up way. And the spaces can enable that. So, and you can see that. And the way we've configured workspace has been a huge enabler in government being much more joined up. So place and space are both equally important. Because you could have everybody in a place, in a town, but not be connected. And I see space as the way of leveraging the place. I hope that makes sense.
That's a perfect answer. Thank you very much. So just focusing on the place element then, what do you think the future is for place in the civil service?
Place, I think, so look, we've had a change of government. We know that the government has a very strong missions focus. We know they're very much about place. Everything I'm hearing, everything I'm seeing is about place. And what government means by that is we can't operate in a world that says the private sector's over here, central government's over here, and somewhere over there is local government and civic leaders. We can't operate in that way and do things differently and not be connected. So place is about how do we bring some of the best minds in places across the UK, together in those places, who have an insight and understanding of those places, that can join up, understand where private sector can add real value, understand how we can deliver better for citizens locally, and ensure that government, central government, acts as an enabler and not as an inhibitor to many of the things that government wants to deliver over the next few years. So I think there's much more join up on place, and the direction we're going in means that we can no longer operate in our silos on our own. We have to be working with each other. And I think those who don't work together will find that actually they're soon really pushed out, because they won't be part of the journey that I think government wants to go on in making places really vibrant.
Thanks, Ravi. That's really, really insightful, and I think, and I really like the fact that you mentioned that space and place, although they're different terms, they're complementary of each other and they have to work together. So that's really, really good. Leah, let's come to you next. What do you think the role of space is in all of this?
Space. We talked about space a lot in the last session, about spaces supporting people to be productive. So I won't go over that again, other than to say space gets quite complex when you're thinking of all the things that it needs to support. Productivity is just one of those things that we were touching on just now in terms of getting the right spaces to be productive, the services and the technology. But then I started to think of like a really short list that as I go through now, in terms of what else those spaces need to do to support people. And it's not just about productivity. We want people to be engaged with those spaces. So it needs to cater for all sorts of things as well. So we've got well-being, that we need spaces where we can refresh and recharge and kind of like get through our day. It needs to support our health and our well-being. So there could be spaces that we need either, I know we've got some spaces in our hubs for things like yoga or showers so that people can have running clubs and things like that. So then you come on to community as well, and having those communal spaces for people to be able to come together and share. Spaces also need to be inclusive. So it needs to support inclusivity and accessibility. Spaces by default should be accessible to everyone. It shouldn't be something that's engineered in. It should also cater for things like faith requirements. That's something that we've also been working a lot in our hubs. When I was at Civil Service Live, I did have someone come up to me and say the difference that is made working in our hubs, because we've got those facilities where they can pray. It's meant that they haven't had to go home at lunchtime and at various points in the day. And she'd actually say to me, it has changed my life. And I think it's the things like that that can make a difference. It's not just about being productive, it's about supporting people and the way that they connect with those spaces. So it does get very complex. It's got to cater for all of those needs. And then on top of that, as humans, we're very individual, we're very complex. We each have all these different needs. So one size doesn't fit all. I think it's really important that we listen to our customers, understand what their needs are, and make sure we're delivering the spaces that they need. And when I was reflecting ahead of this session, thinking about the roller coaster that we have been on with our workspaces, when I first started in the civil service, quite a long time ago, it was fixed computers, so it's desktop computers, allocated workspaces. I'm hoping I'm not the only person here who remembers those days, that I'm not the only person who's showing my age. And then as we progressed from that, when we were there, you'd have a desk and you'd have meeting rooms, you'd print off your papers and you'd go to a meeting room. And they were basically your choices that you had in the workplace. Then we started to bring in these other space types. We had the technology that allowed us to move around, and these space types started to come up. And I think we were really getting into that flow of using those spaces in different ways. Then we were hit with COVID, and that completely changed the way that we work. And we were all working from home. And now we're coming back to the office, and our needs from that office and those different space types has changed yet again. And we might get into that a bit more. But what I'm kind of curious about is what we're finding is that we have all these great space types, but we're really finding that people are using the same space type for all different activities, and how that's helping or hindering people, and it's kind of like affecting people in different ways. And I'm even curious as to whether working from home has made that worse, because I know whenever I speak to people and they're working from home, they're always in the same spot. And I know I always work in the same spot when I'm at home. Has that got us into bad habits? And I think there's a lot of work to do with behavioural change. And when we had the Champions Hangout earlier, we were talking about behavioural change and how difficult that is, and getting those nudges to get people to work in the right way. So I think there's a long way to go now with behaviour change. And I think the other thing with space, it needs to be inviting. People need to feel connected with it. It needs to be vibrant. It needs to be friendly. And in the GPA, we do a lot of work around communities, so that when people do come to work, they can feel that connection. We know that there's statistics around how important it is to have friends in work, so that when you come in, you have those connections, and it really does start to attract people. We've said for a long time we want the office to be a magnet, not a mandate. And so there's a lot of things that we need to do. But what I would say is, thinking about all those things, it's so complex to get these spaces right. And we've been talking this afternoon about being flexible, being adaptable, and kind of responding to different needs of customers. But the most important thing is to be getting feedback, understanding, changing, learning, and growing.
Thanks, Leah. That's interesting. I mean, you mentioned there the desktop computers. So I wasn't a civil servant at the time, but I do remember desktop computers. That's a long journey that we've come on to get to this point, and you know that wasn't luck. We didn't guess. It was found on data and insights. But from the data and insights that we collect, and we are really, really lucky in the GPA to have the wealth of data we have. What are our customers telling us through those insights that might influence the future of the workplace?
I think we've learned quite a lot since COVID. During the COVID era, you know, we were really saying what works well at home, what we're struggling with at home. And we know that what people struggled with is those connections, those social interactions, learning from other people. We know the office supports that a lot better. So I think there very much was a feeling that the post-COVID office would be a place to collaborate and to connect and for community. And people would do their concentration at home. But that was just too simplistic a view to look at it as being like that black and white in terms of how we're going to see our future workplaces. And I think we've done a lot of learning. I think across the industry and globally, we've done a lot of learning since then. We've learned that it's really vital when people come into the office that they have spaces to concentrate. But what we are finding is that maybe even more so since working from home, people are more used to having acoustic privacy in their home or in their remote locations. And so their demands for that are increasing in the workplace. We also know that teams are really distributed now, whether that's because of ways of working. We know from our data that previously 75% of people worked in the office, or pre-COVID, 75% of people worked in the office 4 or 5 days a week. Now that obviously that's really quite different. It's kind of like swung the other way. So when people are having those meetings, previously it could have been face-to-face and you could go for a chat in different spaces. Now people are in their Teams meetings or in their Google Meets. So it's using that tech and that AV to connect with people. And the teams are distributed because they could be working from another location. Places for Growth actually is meaning that teams are working across the country. So people having spaces to have those meetings has gone up. I'm sure you've seen the same in all your workplaces. Those single person pods and booths, they are so heavily in demand. I can't see that changing as we continue to do programs like Places for Growth, and we find that equilibrium in terms of where and when and how people will work. I think that acoustic privacy in those spaces are going to make a difference in terms of whether a workplace is a great workplace and whether it's supporting people. I've talked quite a while there, Lewis. But in terms of like the future workplace, I know we're talking in the Champions Hangout, being agile and flexible and adaptable, listening to people and not feeling like it's one size fits all. I think the future is going to very much depend on what people are telling us.
Thanks, Leah. And you know, you mentioned communities and vibrant workplaces there, and they're clearly really important themes in the public sector, but also, Hannah, I guess in the private sector as well. You know, there's a heavy inference on that as well that you're seeing through there. So how at JLL are you addressing those things with your clients and customers?
Firstly, they are really important themes. It's probably just worth saying that. And we are engaging and advising a lot of our clients across, and we use similar wording, kind of workplaces and spaces as well, to create resilient spaces and places of the future. Absolutely everything you just said there, Leah, resonates with me. I mean, they're not just themes that are relevant to the public sector. It's absolutely something that's happening across organisations. All organisations are grappling with this and trying to look at transformational journeys. I think the narrative around it is changing a little bit. So, you know, 2 years ago, I would have been talking to clients a lot about, the role and the value of the place of work. And I don't think anybody is really questioning that. I think everybody sees the value from a culture perspective, from a collaboration perspective, all the bits that Leah has outlined. But But what I think we are starting to see is a real shift towards people and creating real human-centric, people-first, experience-led approaches to real estate. And a key part of that is design, and I will let Jen speak much more eloquently than I'll be able to about that in a minute. But it's only one of the elements, and I think it's all about focusing on people, addressing differences, needs, requirements, and also the needs of organizations. So, the corporate agenda of companies that I deal with, sustainability being a key part of that, a shift in focus to properly address E and S, so also bringing in the social elements. So we recently ran a global survey, and 46% of our clients globally said that they have a well-defined social impact strategy and program in place. So it's happening now. Companies are really looking at the impact that they're having on communities. They're looking at how they can engage with communities and bring them more into the places of work that they have. So I think that's a really important one, to think about the corporate agenda and also the people and what the workforce expects from a social impact perspective, from a wellness perspective, as you just mentioned there, Lewis. But I loved it when you said, Leah, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. And I think it's true. It's regardless of the industry. There is no one-size-fits-all. It's about, it's great to hear, Lewis, you said you've kind of got data, and Ravi was talking about data. It's great that you have the data, because I think any organization that has been able to invest in technology platforms that therefore does have the data and does have the insight about what people want and how buildings can deliver that, whether it's whether it's, cooler spaces, or which space are people using, when and how and why, and what's how long do they spend there. But I think if you have that transparency across portfolios, you can really start to create places that are future fit for organizations and also for the people within workforces.
Thanks, Anna. So what are the similarities that you're seeing as well in some of the data sets that you have, or I guess some of the differences as well? And I guess more importantly, when you look on a global scale, things like intelligence or common themes, what are the trends you're starting to see there?
I think the main one, it's a really important time for real estate. It's probably the first point that I'd make. Like, all organizations globally are on a transformational journey. But I also think that it's a really challenging time for real estate, because all of this is happening at a time when everybody's under pressure from a cost perspective as well. I don't know, I speak to, lots of global companies. I don't know if anybody is actually fully cracked, a fully functioning hybrid place of work. So I think it's organizations really investing in trying to understand places. I think technology, I know I just mentioned it there, but I think it's a key theme, it's a key investment area that we are seeing our clients investing in. If you are investing properly in data platforms, you do have the data to be able to really understand what's going in within buildings and with your people. I think the next step of that is to be able to look at prediction. I think the next step of that is even moving to a level of automation, whether that be managing buildings or kind of spaces within real estate. So, there's a lot of common themes. Hybrid and transformation are probably the things that I talk most about. But I think all organizations are looking at technology, sustainability, social impact, and also cost comes up a lot. That, as I said at the beginning, that this is all happening at a period when people are constrained, and it's that balancing act between transformation and cost and trying to deliver what's most effective. To come back to the point I said at the beginning, for corporate agendas and also workforce.
Thanks, Hannah. I think it's probably a really good time to bring you in now, Jen, because we've understood, we find the place, we make the space, we collect the data and understand how our clients and customers want to use the space. But from a design perspective, you will obviously bring this into it, the iterative, and Don Brankin talked in the previous session about how you can see that iterative improvement in all of our hubs across the GPA. But how can investment into the design of those spaces support longevity, encourage new ways of working, but not just for the benefit of people in the workplace today, but for future generations?
That's a great question. I'll start by saying that as designers, we absolutely do take a people-first approach. We start with people, and our whole aspiration is to design spaces that people want to actually spend time in, and that support their work and nurture their well-being. So that's where we start. Also, design, when you boil it down to its simplest form, I think, is problem solving. So we're looking at the feedback from the customer experience team at GPA. We're seeing what works well, what didn't work well, and we're designing in flexibility so that we can change what we can, and then moving forward on subsequent projects, we're really incorporating those insights into what we do. So I really loved actually Leah talking about everyone having their own workstation assigned to them. When I first started designing workspaces, I actually had people asking me to put slides down to reception and swings into meeting rooms. So there's a parallel universe, I think, where we're sitting in swings on this stage. But yeah, obviously people's tastes evolve and their expectations change around what they need their workspace to do. I think organizations really understand that to attract and retain the best people, they do need to absolutely invest in the design of the space, and also that by investing in the design, it is investing in people. So we've been on this journey with the GPA for several years now. Again, touching on what Dominic mentioned about if you go across the country to the different hubs, if you go chronologically, the first one is much different from the last, and you have the benefit of learning from previous projects. I think what we do really understand that the civil service has very specialist requirements, and we also know that those requirements can change very quickly. So of course we're always looking at how we can future-proof our designs and design for flexibility, and also inclusivity is a big one. I actually want to touch on that point a bit more. So I don't think we can talk about the future of workspace and investment into design without talking about inclusivity, which is essentially just creating spaces for everyone, regardless of their abilities or their circumstances. And we as designers, again, we want to create spaces where people can feel welcomed and supported and included. This has many benefits. I'll just name a few. Increased collaboration. You also have better, kind of more creative problem solving, getting more people and more ideas around the table. And then, of course, higher workplace satisfaction. What we're finding is that, inclusive design is not just good for people, it's actually good for organizations' bottom lines as well. There's a really great study out of Barclays, actually their new campus in Glasgow, where inclusive design was really at the heart. It was one of the main drivers of the design process. And what they have found is that for every £1 spent on inclusive design features, they saw basically a £100 savings in retrofit down the line. So that is really, I think, impactful and shows the importance of investment in design.
Thanks, Jen. Fantastic answer that was. So Ravi, I think we've kind of done almost full circle. We're almost back now that we've learned and we're thinking about spaces again, and we've established the importance of space throughout the panel and in the conversation. But how does the investment needed in the right spaces to work influence or form or shape the future places for growth agenda?
So for us, we're working very closely with GPA now, because actually for Government Property Agency, they're very much focused on where should that investment be? What parts of the country should we concentrate? We've just done a piece of analysis for colleagues across government, looking at where the largest concentration in UK government employees are, central government and wider government, and looked at the grade mix and the makeup of that workforce and the nature of work we're doing in these places. We've weighted it to identify where we think we would have greatest impact if we were to spend our marginal pound in places. And I know Mark Bourgeois, as the new CEO, who was just announced yesterday, so congratulations to Mark as the CEO for GPA. Mark's been very much in this space, asking the questions about where can we get the investment. He's certainly seeking investment at the moment from Treasury on a number of places across the UK where we know that if you were to spend your marginal pound, you would have greatest impact by creating great new hubs. Now, it's really important that we continue on this journey to consolidate more and more of our ageing office estate and consolidate into hubs. It's really, really important because it brings together big sections of government together and it creates opportunities for collaboration in a way that we have only seen in the first earlier phases of our consolidation programs. And so there's, I think, one area there where we can still continue to make a big impact, and I'm really looking forward to the work we're going to do in that area and get the investment. I think the other area where I think we could do more, there are some other office areas. Andrew Goodman, a colleague of mine from DWP, sat in the audience there, was chatting to me earlier. He's got so many offices across the UK, and they're in random towns and places. And he has great, because sometimes they are customer facing, but sometimes customers can travel a little bit further to get a better quality office, a better place to meet a government employee. But some of those buildings they're run down, you wipe your feet on the way out. And it's not inspiring for the employee, let alone for a member of the public who wants to go into these buildings, right? So I think there's a lot more to be done in this space as well around place. And I think DWP, like other bits of government, now want to be in fewer places, but have better quality places where people can go and feel that they are valued. So I'm talking about the citizen now. That when you walk into a place and you think some effort's gone into the place and the space, and the staff feel happier and more engaged because they feel they're being valued, actually the end outcome is a greater outcome for the individual, right? For the citizen. So I think we need to do more in this space, and that's the area where I think we can probably do much, much more, and maybe we need the creatives and the designers in that space. I don't know if you can design a great looking work and pensions office, I don't know, or a job centre or something, but there are, I think, some things that we can do, not just for the citizen, but the employee as well.
Thanks, Ravi. So thank you for that really interesting and insightful conversation. Just a reminder to the audience, both remotely and in here, please drop your questions and use the chat feature, and we'll come back to those shortly. Before we do, though, I did like in the last panel the quickfire bit. So quickfire for you guys, magic one time. Considering everything we know about what a great place to work looks like and feels like, what's one immediate change you would make to the workplace today that would benefit the workplace of tomorrow? Jen, let's go to you first.
No surprises here. For me, it's about inclusivity. I think workspaces that have inclusivity at their hearts, they put people at the center. They provide all the options that people need in the present, whilst also allowing for flexibility in the future.
I work in research, so I'm a data nerd. So I'm going to say data, and I did allude to this, but just to reinforce the point that I think in order to make sure that places are future fit and wholly fit for purpose, I think understanding how places and spaces are used is absolutely fundamental in order to kind of get, whether it's design element or whatever aspect of the place of work is. I think understanding the data, how people use space, kind of performance metrics of buildings, of people. I just think data undermines everything. And I know it's easy for me to say that because I work in research, but I think having those proof points helps. Come back to your point, Jen, actually, of kind of that ROI, like being able to prove kind of, return on investment as well. So yeah, data for me, I think is just really important, but by investing in tech and then getting the data.
Thank you. Leah?
I'm going to kind of like jump on both of those bandwagons. What I'm going to talk about is our team have done a lot of work in terms of understanding people with accessibility needs. So our Insight team, since we've been surveying civil servants, we've always had questions that we ask around accessibility and those sorts of needs. And what the team found when they did a really in-depth study was when they looked at people with accessibility needs, whether it's physical disabilities or mental health conditions or neurodiverse profiles, the people that were having the worst experience by quite a substantial way was people who had neurodiverse profiles. So we've been working then with our design and engineering team to pass on that learning. So for me, in terms of a magic wand, it would be, we've got a high proportion of our people using our buildings of civil servants who have neurodiverse profiles. What can we do to make sure that we are improving their workplace experience? One of the things I do worry about when we talk about occupancy rates is actually the more densely packed our buildings are, and making sure I know we want to get value for our buildings, but actually that has quite an impact on people who have neurodiverse profiles. It can be really noisy, it can be really overstimulating. So what can we do to make sure that we have the right spaces to support everyone?
Thanks, Leah. Ravi, your wish.
We've done a lot of work in government on telling people why they should come into the office. We create these lovely buildings and great workspaces. My wish is that we move to a place where people are excited to come into the workplace. They see the huge value that they get from being in that place. They see the opportunities for innovation, creativity, working together, bouncing off each other. In some cases, people only have friends when they get to work. So it might be that if you want a friend, you come to the office. We have to excite. We need a world where people feel excited to come into the office.
Thank you very much. So we do have a few moments as well for some questions now. I didn't realise they moved up and down as well, so this is quite difficult because I found one and it disappeared, and it was my favourite. This one, though, is what are the biggest challenges to bringing people on a smarter working journey in government buildings? Leah, that's probably a good one for you.
Biggest challenge
Yeah.
in terms of bringing people on board?
Yeah.
So I noticed yesterday when we had our first day of our conference, Sarah did a session, if anyone joined the conference in the morning yesterday, she did a really good pulse survey where she asked people in terms of how much they understand about smarter working on a scale of 1 to 5. And we had loads of people who joined it and lots of people voting. So as we talking about data, we love a bit of data. And when that averaged out then, the average score was 3.1 out of 5. So it just went to show that even though we're in our 4th year of Smarter Working Live, people are at times still kind of wondering what it's all about. So I think for me, the biggest challenge is that re-education is not a one and done. It is evolving. I think we're seeing a faster and faster pace in terms of smarter working. We've been talking a lot about AI. We've been talking a lot about communities. We've been talking a lot about getting spaces right. So I think the biggest challenge is that continuous education. It's an ongoing journey. So for me, I think that's probably like the biggest challenge, but also the biggest opportunity.
Thank you very much. Ravi, I've got a very good one for you here. How can we as civil servants ensure that space sharing leads to the joined up decisions and policy making that you earlier mentioned? How can we make sure that that actually happens?
There's lots of things out there, research has been done globally that says what you can do. Part of our work has been mapping particular clustering of skills in parts of the country. So there is a particular skill set in a place where you think you can join up. For example, we've developed the cyber corridor in Manchester, Preston, Salisbury, because National Cyber Force to all our digital data, cyber security jobs all going into Manchester. And we've seen a big clustering there. West Midlands, we've seen a strong clustering around infrastructure and transport. Leeds, really, lots of NHS England and private providers, and join up with local partners on health and health clustering. Darlington today, who've got their, I think it's called the Eco Fest or Economic Fest today. Is that right, Carla? Where we've got clustering of economic skills across a number of departments. Clustering in that way is one way into this. right? So we've seen that as kind of a positive mechanism to bringing similar things together. And all of these are policy-making parts of government. If I go to Sheffield, we launched our very first social policy campus. Because actually most social policy, believe it or not, was done in London, because everybody in London were the experts on policy for the whole of UK, of course. But the world has moved on, and we need to be better at place-based policy making. And so uniting bits of government in place, co-locating them and getting them to work together on similar shared issues does drive better policy outcome. Thanks,
Ravi. And last question, to both Hannah and Jen, because it actually happens to be quite a good one for both of you. What trends in workplace design do you foresee having the most impact on the way we work in 10 to 20 years' time? How can we design future forward?
Could you, the start of that, sorry, I'm getting a bit of background sound. What the trends in workplace?
What trends in workplace design do you foresee having the most impact on the way we work in 10 to 20 years' time? Should we start with you, Jen?
So there's a big trend for, I mean, I don't like to call it a trend. I hope that it's kind of an expectation and a standard now, design for well-being, which also, you know, overlaps with inclusive design as well. I think that, yeah, if you can design a space that is nurturing to people's well-being, whilst also allowing them to do the work they need to do. There's loads of benefits to coming into that space and working. And yeah, it is kind of about the amenities, I think. Otherwise, you would probably just stay at home. So yeah, I think that's it.
Just to add, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with that from kind of an employee perspective. So just maybe put an additional perspective from, say, like the corporate lens. We're finding that corporates need a level of flexibility, and the point was raised earlier on. So being able to have spaces that are designed to allow a level of flexibility that can, you know, either ebb and flow with people's days and needs and requirements, or equally if all of a sudden you need more desks somewhere, so we need to take out, you know, maybe there's something that can be moved out and something else can be put in. So from a kind of a corporate strategy perspective, flexibility is really important, either within the workforce, within the office or the workplace, but equally looking at it from a strategic perspective, and, you know, maybe engaging with landlords looking for flexible space from a lease perspective, or flexible space from a you know, a flex provider. So totally agree with that, and I think, yeah, you know, that's kind of the employee drive, but just putting the kind of corporate lens on that, I think flexibility is really important.
Thank you very much. So sadly we've come to the end of the panel discussion today, but you know, I guess in summary, the thing that I've kind of captured from all of this is that whatever we decide to do in the future, we need to start planning and doing now in order for us to be able to reap the benefits of those things in the future, and that requires investment, knowledge, data, and support. So thank you to the panel for today. A round of applause, please, for Ravi, Hannah, Jen, and Leah. So I'll hand over now to our Chief Executive, Mark Bourgeois. Thank you.